What should have been the most joyous moments of their lives became their final breaths as 6 wedding celebrations descended into scenes of death and devastation. These are the most shocking wedding disasters ever recorded, where vows of eternal love were cut short by brutal accidents that transformed altars into crime scenes and dance floors into death traps. It was September 3rd, 2016, in a vineyard clearing nestled in California's Napa Valley. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dry, compacted earth as guests gathered for what should have been a perfect outdoor ceremony. A steady breeze had been building throughout the day, rustling through the grapevines and carrying the scent of ripening fruit across the property. The temperature held steady at 78 degrees, with clear skies promising an ideal evening celebration. Denver Quigg, a 34-year-old logistics coordinator from San Francisco, stood beneath the ceremony arch adjusting his tie. Known for his appreciation of industrial aesthetics and meticulous attention to detail in his professional work managing supply chains, Denver had specifically requested the rustic metal decor that now framed the altar. His friend, a 36-year-old hobbyist welder, had spent weeks crafting the structure from rigid rebar, carefully grinding down the tips to create decorative points that caught the afternoon light. The arch rose 8 feet above the ground, spanning 12 feet in width, anchored by 4 stakes driven into the vineyard soil. What appeared sturdy from a distance concealed a critical flaw. The stakes had been driven unevenly into the dry earth at varying depths, and no lateral bracing connected the frame at mid-height to distribute wind loads. Although the surface appeared compact, shallow irrigation earlier that morning had softened the soil beneath the crust, compromising the anchoring system. As the wind continued to strengthen throughout the afternoon, gusting up to 30 miles per hour, the structure began experiencing subtle rotational stress that went unnoticed by the wedding party. Guests had arranged their chairs in neat rows, positioning themselves within 6 to 8 feet of the arch for optimal viewing. The officiant had begun the proceedings when Denver took his position directly beneath the crossbeam, his back to the strengthening breeze that now gusted intermittently across the exposed clearing. The failure happened without warning during the exchange of preliminary remarks. One of the rear stakes suddenly pulled free from the softened soil beneath the dry surface. Instead of toppling backward, the arch twisted forward in an unexpected rotational motion. The rigid rebar tip, sharpened to a decorative point, entered Denver's upper chest just below his left collarbone at a downward angle. The forward momentum of the heavy metal frame, weighing approximately 180 pounds, drove the steel deep through lung tissue and into his chest cavity. The rebar impaled him and drove him backward, collapsing him against the crossbeam until several guests could manually stabilize the frame from both sides. Heavy external bleeding was immediately visible to those nearby, and Denver showed no signs of movement or response. Fire department personnel arrived within 12 minutes and worked systematically to cut through the metal frame using hydraulic tools to free Denver's body without causing additional trauma. He was pronounced dead at the scene from penetrating chest trauma and severe blood loss. The investigation documented inadequate ground anchoring techniques, failure to account for soil conditions, and insufficient wind load calculations. The ceremony site was immediately closed and cordoned off, and the remaining metal framework was carefully dismantled and removed as evidence. No secondary injuries occurred among the wedding guests, though several required brief medical evaluation for shock. The official report cited structural failure due to improper installation methods and environmental factors as the direct cause of the fatal accident. It was January 14, 2016, on a mountain lodge access road in Estes Park, Colorado. The afternoon temperature held at 28 degrees, with intermittent snow flurries creating a thin layer of ice on the winding asphalt. The narrow road descended at a moderate grade toward the lodge, with steep embankments on both sides. A passenger shuttle van had arrived to transport wedding guests and their luggage from the remote mountain venue back to town. The vehicle towed a small enclosed trailer loaded with suitcases and wedding equipment. The trailer lacked independent braking systems and relied entirely on the van's parking brake for stability. The trailer hitch showed visible signs of corrosion and wear from exposure to mountain weather conditions. Marnie Flug, a 40-year-old event coordination professional, had volunteered to oversee the luggage loading and guest departure process. She had known the bride, Sarah Kendrick, since their college years, when the two had been roommates and frequent hiking companions. When Sarah announced her engagement, Marnie had been among the first people she called. Known for her organizational skills, Marnie had spent the weekend ensuring that all aspects of Sarah's mountain wedding proceeded smoothly. The shuttle had stopped on a section of road with a mild downhill grade to allow guests to load their belongings. The driver had engaged the parking brake, but had not placed wheel chocks behind the trailer wheels. The icy road surface created additional challenges for maintaining vehicle stability. As guests retrieved their luggage, the weight distribution within the trailer shifted repeatedly. Suitcases and equipment had been loaded without systematic organization, creating an uneven load that placed varying stress on the hitch connection. The corroded hitch components had been weakened by repeated freeze-thaw cycles and road salt exposure. Marnie positioned herself behind the trailer to direct the final loading sequence and ensure that all items were properly secured before departure. Her location allowed her to coordinate with both the driver and guests while maintaining visual oversight. The hitch failure occurred suddenly when the accumulated stress from the shifting load exceeded the weakened connection point. The corroded metal components separated completely, releasing the trailer from the shuttle van. Without independent brakes, the trailer immediately began rolling backward down the icy grade, gaining momentum as it moved away from the stationary vehicle. Marnie heard the distinctive sound of the hitch separation and turned toward the noise. The trailer was already moving at significant speed when she attempted to step aside. The heavy trailer struck her legs and pelvis area, knocking her to the ground and pulling her beneath the moving vehicle. The trailer continued rolling downhill for approximately 150 feet, dragging Marnie along the icy asphalt surface before coming to rest against a roadside embankment. The sustained contact with the road surface and the weight of the loaded trailer caused severe traumatic injuries to her lower body and internal organs. Multiple witnesses immediately called emergency services, while others attempted first aid. The remote mountain location, combined with icy road conditions, delayed paramedic arrival to 28 minutes. They immediately began advanced trauma protocols. Despite aggressive treatment efforts, Marnie was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries resulting from being struck and dragged by the runaway trailer. Colorado State Patrol investigators documented the hitch failure and examined the corroded components. The investigation revealed that metal fatigue and environmental corrosion had compromised the hitch assembly's structural integrity. The final report concluded that equipment failure due to inadequate maintenance was the primary factor in the fatal accident. It was June 11th, 2015, at a working ranch outside Cheyenne, Wyoming. The late afternoon sun beat down on the dusty property where cattle grazed in distant pastures, and the scent of hay mixed with dry summer air. Temperature held steady at 84 degrees with minimal cloud cover, creating ideal conditions for the outdoor reception planned around the ranch's rustic charm. The celebration took place in a cleared area near the main barn, where folding tables had been arranged for buffet dinner. 2 saddled horses, a bay mare and chestnut gelding, stood tethered to a wooden post approximately 15 feet from the food service area. The animals were included as part of the Western-themed atmosphere, though no designated handler remained present to monitor their behavior. Gully Thrope, a 49-year-old cousin of the bride, had volunteered to assist with reception logistics throughout the evening. Known among family members for his helpful nature and willingness to take on practical tasks, Gully had spent the afternoon moving chairs and coordinating with catering staff. His background in manual labor made him a natural choice for handling the physical aspects of event setup. As dinner service began, the DJ increased music volume to accommodate conversation among the growing crowd. The sound system, positioned near the buffet area, created steady, amplified music that carried across the open space. Children moved freely between tables and around the tethered horses, occasionally running past the animals while playing games. The bay mare had shown signs of agitation throughout the evening, repeatedly startling when guests walked behind her and shifting nervously when music volume increased. Her ears remained pinned back, and she had pulled against her tether several times when sudden movements occurred. The spacing between horses allowed minimal room for either animal to move away from perceived threats. Gully approached the buffet area from behind the horses, carrying used dinner plates back to the catering station. His path took him within 3 feet of the mare's hindquarters as he focused on balancing dishes and navigating around other guests. Music continued at elevated volume, while children played nearby, creating constant noise and movement. The triggering incident occurred when someone dropped a metal serving tray near the buffet table, creating a loud crash that echoed across the reception area. The bay mare, already on edge from ongoing stimulation, reacted instinctively to the sudden noise. She kicked backward with both hind legs in a defensive response, her hooves traveling in a powerful arc. Both hooves struck Gully simultaneously in the upper abdomen and lower rib cage, with full force of the animal's defensive kick. The impact threw him backward onto packed dirt surface, where he landed heavily. The blunt force trauma caused immediate internal injuries, including catastrophic liver and splenic rupture and internal bleeding not immediately visible to witnesses. Gully remained conscious for several minutes after impact, but showed signs of severe distress and was unable to stand. His breathing became labored, and he lost responsiveness as internal bleeding progressed. Several guests with medical training attempted assistance, while others called emergency services. Paramedics arrived within 14 minutes and immediately began advanced life support procedures. Despite their efforts, Gully was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was blunt force trauma to the torso, resulting in multiple organ rupture and internal hemorrhaging. Ranch personnel immediately removed both horses from the guest area. The reception was terminated, and the incident area was cordoned off for investigation. Authorities documented animal positioning relative to guest traffic patterns and noted absence of adequate supervision during the event. It was July 4th, 2018, in a residential backyard in Springfield, Missouri. The evening air held at a comfortable 78 degrees as twilight approached, with clear skies providing perfect conditions for the planned fireworks send-off. The modest suburban property featured a well-maintained lawn surrounded by wooden fencing, with neighbors gathering on adjacent patios to watch. The backyard ceremony had concluded an hour earlier, and guests now assembled in a semicircle around a designated launch area near the back fence. A collection of consumer fireworks had been arranged on a folding table, including several aerial shells designed for backyard use. The launch setup consisted of an improvised metal launch tube, not rated for repeated use, that had been employed multiple times throughout the summer. Pippa Jantz, a 24-year-old college senior and sister-in-law of the bride, positioned herself near the front of the gathered crowd with her smartphone ready to record the finale. Known among friends for her enthusiasm for capturing memorable moments, Pippa had volunteered to document the send-off for the couple's social media accounts. A relative, experienced with consumer fireworks, had taken charge of the launch sequence using the same improvised metal tube that had successfully fired dozens of shells over the past several months. The tube showed visible signs of wear, including small dents and discoloration. Guests remained positioned within 3 to 4 feet of the setup, far closer than recommended safety guidelines. The metal tube measured approximately 18 inches in length and 2 inches in diameter, designed to contain the initial explosion that propels aerial fireworks skyward. However, the tube had sustained internal damage from previous launches that was not visible from the outside. Additionally, the fireworks selected for the finale had been inadvertently loaded upside down, with the fuse end pointing toward the bottom. Pippa stood directly in front of the launch tube, holding her phone at eye level to capture the moment when the firework would streak into the sky. Other guests had positioned themselves in a loose arc around the launch area, none maintaining an adequate safety perimeter. The relative lit the fuse and stepped back, expecting normal sequence of events. Instead of launching skyward, the firework ignited inside the obstructed tube. The explosive force had nowhere to escape due to the reversed loading and internal tube damage. Pressure built instantly within the confined metal space until the tube ruptured outward in multiple directions. Metal fragments from the ruptured tube traveled at high velocity in a cone-shaped pattern. Several pieces struck Pippa in the neck and lower jaw area, with one fragment severing a major blood vessel in her neck. The force of the explosion knocked her backward onto the grass, where she immediately began bleeding heavily. Multiple witnesses saw the incident and immediately called for emergency assistance, while others attempted first aid. The bleeding was severe and difficult to control, despite efforts to apply direct pressure. Pippa lost consciousness within minutes as blood loss progressed rapidly. Emergency medical services arrived within 9 minutes and immediately began advanced trauma protocols. Despite aggressive treatment, Pippa was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was exsanguination due to severing of a major neck vessel by metal fragments. Fire department investigators recovered pieces of the ruptured launch tube and documented the improper loading of the firework. The investigation revealed that internal tube damage combined with reversed firework orientation had created conditions for the catastrophic failure. The final report concluded that equipment failure due to repeated use and improper firework loading were the primary factors in the fatal incident. It was October 22, 2017, at a historic hall in Savannah, Georgia. The evening temperature held steady at 72 degrees, with high humidity typical of the coastal region. Inside the century-old venue, original hardwood floors creaked softly under the weight of guests. The building's aged infrastructure showed uneven floorboards and subtle settling over decades. The reception centerpiece was an elaborate 5-tier wedding cake that had been delivered earlier in the afternoon. The massive confection stood nearly 6 feet tall and weighed approximately 320 pounds, reinforced with steel dowels and dense fondant layers that required special structural support beyond what a standard table could provide. Event staff had reinforced the display table by stacking concrete cinder blocks beneath the surface, concealing the makeshift support system under white tablecloths. Roswell Cobb, a 63-year-old retired construction worker and brother-in-law of the groom, had volunteered to assist with the reception setup throughout the day. Known among family and friends for his practical problem-solving skills and willingness to help with manual tasks, Roswell had spent his career working with heavy materials. His experience with construction had made him a natural choice for handling the physical aspects of venue preparation. The display table had been positioned near the center of the main reception hall, where guests could easily view and photograph the impressive cake. However, The table legs had been placed unevenly on the aged wooden flooring, which featured gaps and irregularities that had developed over the building's long history. The floor showed signs of settling and wear. As the evening progressed, guests frequently leaned against the table edge while taking photographs and admiring the cake's decorative work. The additional weight and pressure from multiple people pressing against the table created stress on the already precarious support system. The cinder blocks beneath the tablecloth had been stacked without proper interlocking. Roswell noticed that the table appeared slightly unstable and crouched down to examine the support structure and make adjustments to the block positioning. His position placed him directly beneath the table's edge, with his head and upper body positioned under the heavy load. The aged floor flexed noticeably under the combined weight. The structural failure occurred when one table leg slipped into a gap between floorboards that had widened over time. The sudden shift caused the entire table to collapse inward toward the compromised leg. The stacked cinder blocks, no longer properly supported, fell in multiple directions as the table surface tilted sharply. One concrete block, weighing approximately 35 pounds, fell edge first and struck Roswell directly on the head and upper neck area. The impact occurred with significant force due to the block's weight and height from which it fell. The blow caused immediate skull fractures and severe trauma to the cervical spine region. Roswell showed no movement following the impact and remained motionless beneath the collapsed table structure. Several guests witnessed the incident and immediately called for emergency assistance, while others worked to clear the debris and access Roswell. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 11 minutes and immediately began assessment and treatment protocols. Despite their efforts, Roswell was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was severe head trauma resulting from blunt force impact to the skull and neck. Building inspectors documented the uneven floor conditions and inadequate load distribution methods used for the cake display. The investigation revealed that aged flooring, improper support stacking, and excessive load concentration had created conditions for the structural failure. The final report concluded that inadequate structural assessment and improper load-bearing techniques were the primary factors contributing to the fatal collapse. It was February 18, 2017, in a community hall in Bakersfield, California. The modest venue buzzed with anticipation as evening guests arrived for the reception celebration. Outside, temperatures had dropped to a comfortable 52 degrees, while inside, the hall's concrete floors reflected warm overhead lighting that created an intimate atmosphere. The centerpiece of the evening was an innovative LED dance floor system installed earlier that day. 16 modular panels, each measuring 4 feet square, had been assembled to create a 16 by 16 foot illuminated surface. A 21-year-old part-time assistant working with the DJ company had spent the afternoon connecting electrical components, working unsupervised after the licensed technician failed to arrive. He ran power cables beneath panels and secured connections with standard electrical tape. Lotta Brinks, a 28-year-old office administrator, moved through the crowd, greeting guests and ensuring everything proceeded smoothly. Known for her attention to detail and passion for incorporating modern elements into traditional events, she had specifically requested the lighted floor feature months earlier. Her methodical planning approach had covered most reception aspects, though technical installation details were left to the audio equipment crew. Throughout the cocktail hour, the dance area served as a gathering point where guests admired the technology while holding drinks. Multiple spills occurred as people leaned over panels to examine the LED system, with liquid finding its way between panel seams. Moisture slowly accumulated around connection points where individual panels linked to the main power supply. The power distribution system consisted of strips placed directly on concrete, feeding 120-volt current to LED arrays. No ground fault circuit interrupter had been installed, and connections between panels relied on exposed metal contacts vulnerable to moisture infiltration. As the formal reception began, Lotta prepared for the first dance by removing her shoes, intending to experience the smooth panel surface directly. Several guests had also gone barefoot, following the modern trend of casual dancing. The DJ activated special lighting as she stepped onto the central area. The electrical fault, developed when accumulated liquid, created a conductive path through a compromised junction. Current flowed through metal panel trim, which became energized at full line voltage. Lotta's bare feet contacted the wet area while her hands simultaneously touched electrified trim as she moved across the surface. The 120-volt current caused immediate involuntary muscle contractions, preventing her from releasing contact with energized components. The current passed foot to hand across her chest, directly through the heart. She fell backward onto panels, her body maintaining the electrical circuit. Distinctive burn marks appeared on her feet and palm where current had entered and exited. Multiple witnesses observed the incident and immediately called for power disconnection. A guest with electrical experience located and threw the main breaker, cutting power to the dance floor system. CPR was initiated immediately while emergency services were summoned. Emergency medical personnel arrived within 8 minutes and continued advanced life support measures for 25 minutes before declaring Lotta deceased. The official determination was electrocution caused by electrical current passing through her body. Fire department investigators documented moisture contamination in multiple electrical connections and absence of required safety protection devices. The venue was cleared and the entire LED system dismantled for evidence collection. Investigation concluded that liquid infiltration combined with inadequate electrical safety measures created the fatal hazard. The final report identified improper installation methods and missing ground fault protection as direct causes of the electrocution. Thanks for watching. Want to see more? Click on your screen now.